this? Dear Madam President of the Salzburg Parliament, Brigitte Pallauf, dear Martin Gilbert, Director of the British Council in Austria, dear Yinka Shonibare in the digital world outside, not here this evening, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of the Museum der Moderne Salzburg. I would like to give you a very warm welcome. I'm really delighted and honored that we are able to open this important exhibition today. It's a major survey spanning 3 decades of Yinka Shonibare's artistic career. It was really supposed to be shown last summer, but the COVID-19 pandemic thwarted our plans. Now it is finally happening, and it is a positive and hopeful sign for the future that this exhibition sends. I first encountered Yinka Shonibare's work in 2002 at Documenta 11, where the monumental installation Gallantry and Criminal Conversation made its grand appearance and earned the artist's international acclaim. 2 years later, I had the opportunity to see his fabulous show Double Dutch at the Boijmans van Beuningen Museum in Rotterdam. At the time, I first felt the desire to curate a Yinka Shonibare exhibition, which now finally worked out with Yinka Shonibare CBE End of Empire, at last. The exhibition takes a title from a sculpture of the same name. You can see it in the background here. The 2 figures dressed in Victorian garb sit opposite from each other on a seesaw. Their heads replaced by globes, which represent the warring parties of the First World War and their colonial spheres of influence, thereby illustrating the geopolitical dimension of this conflict. The title, End of Empire, refers to the fact that the First World War delivered a first radical shock to the imperial world order and led to the strengthening of anti-colonial movements around the globe. Shonibare's art is highly political and employs globes to document, indeed to deconstruct worldviews and to broaden our perspective. Used in the place of the heads of his figures, they serve as symbols for his global artistic perspective and as an alternative to Eurocentric conceptions of history and culture. The same educational, enlightening approach also characterizes the series of libraries which he has been realizing since 2014. Each of the installations consists of several thousand books which are covered with Shonibare's signature colorful batik fabrics. For the British Library and the American Library, Shonibare had the name of the many first and second generation immigrants who influenced and helped shape the social, cultural, and political life of Great Britain and the USA, printed in gold letters on the spines. The African Library, in turn, is dedicated to the memory of those people who played an important role in the African independence movement and made significant contributions to state building and to the formation of a modern African identity. Not guided by moral judgment in his choices, he listed not only luminous political and cultural figures, but dictators as well. The African Library is one of Shonibare's key works of recent years, and we are delighted to be able to present this extensive installation as a part of our exhibition. The question of the possibility of a real dialogue of cultures plays a crucial role in the methodological discussion of ethnology. Since the 1990s, issues of representation and curatorial authority have moved to the fore in contemporary art and in the exhibition world. With this, the times when the art of other continents was confined to ethnological museums and world art was primarily seen as white art would finally be over. Yinka Shonibare describes his artistic strategy in an early interview. In a way, when people see an artist of African origin, they think, oh, he is here to protest. Yes, okay, I'm here to protest, but I'm going to do it like a gentleman. It is going to look very nice. You are not even going to realize that I am protesting. You are going to invite me to your museum because the work is nice. And when I'm inside, it is too late. But I have to do it nicely, because if I'm already coming to you with a knife, you are going to send me away. Shonibare was born in London and raised in Nigeria. He studied art and art history at Goldsmiths College in London, and today he is one of the most widely known and successful Afro-British artists. In 2019, he was given the title Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire and has since added the acronym CBE to his official name. Well-versed in post-colonial cultural theory, Shonibare sees himself as a post-colonial hybrid who practices the gentle restraint of British gentlemen and has gained access to the most prestigious museums of the Western world with his exquisitely tailored parodies of the lifestyle of the British upper classes. Shonibare's friendly and stylistically consummate subversion consists in his signature use of double-sided, colorfully printed cotton fabrics to invade the art and museums worlds. Seen as typically African, the fabrics are a telling example of global colonial entanglements. Known as Dutch wax, the fabrics were originally created in an attempt to imitate the patterns of the elaborately handcrafted Indonesian batik fabrics and produce them on an industrial scale in a textile printing process. However, the new mass product failed to be successful in the Dutch colony and in the 19th century found its way to West Africa, where a market for the printed cotton fabrics developed. The fabrics came to be designed and produced mainly in the Netherlands and in England, and Africa became the largest market for them. Today, much of the production takes place in Africa and China. Only the most expensive fabrics are made in Holland. The Dutch town of Helmond, near Eindhoven, is where Flisco's exquisite patterns are created, which are used to tailor Africulture, clothing in West Africa. And this is where Shonibare obtains the fabrics of his post-colonial role plays and ironic deconstructions of Victorian traditions and customs. Shonibare's subversive strategy, meanwhile, consists in harnessing the colonial past and post-colonial presence of his industrially manufactured material to create works which visually seduce the viewer, while at the same time revealing themselves as self-reflective constructs. when dressing headless figures in Victorian fashion, bedecking interiors with pseudo-African fabrics, or staging himself in a period series as an admired black dandy of Victorian Empire, he invariably occupies a dual position which, incapable of being assimilated or exoticized, instead explores the third space where cultures meet and mix. The objective of Shonibare's playful visual grammar is to point out hybridity, while at the same time consistently frustrating any desire for authenticity in the sense of longing for immediacy, originality, or purity. England's rise as a global colonial power since the 18th century serves as the preferred historical backdrop for his stagings and installations. Shonibare himself made his appearance in the Victorian interior in his by now iconic photo series Diary of a Victorian Dandy, which in 1998 was placarded in numerous stations of the London Underground. He plays a Victorian African dandy whose daily routine is depicted in 5 tableaux vivants. Each time, the black artist is in the center of attention and of the composition. The admiring eyes of his white servants, friends and guests are on him when he is awaked in the morning, discusses business matters in the library, and subsequently plays billiards. The evening is spent in the company of beautiful women, and the final picture is showing late-night debauchery involving both sexes. Shonibare presents impossible situations by drawing on the conversation pieces of William Hogarth and inverting the hierarchy of skin color so that the racist regime of the gaze underlying this type of genre painting is made obvious. Shonibare's relationship to the Victorian era is ambivalent. On the one hand, he is personally fascinated by Victorian style, refined luxury, and the exquisite taste of the British aristocracy. But on the other, he emphasizes the inhuman flip side of the Victorian era. Of course, I realized as an African that Victorian values for me were very draconian. The Victorians colonized Africa. Basically, the Victorians made Africans work to produce a great empire. So Victorian values to me were values of repression. Ever since the late 1990s, Shonibare had been employing exceptionally well-dressed but headless mannequins to both celebrate and satirize the gallantries, excesses, duels, and bucolic leisure activities, in short, the decadent lifestyle of polite society, or alternatively, the quest for knowledge of Europeans' educated classes. As headless bodies, the figures are robbed of their individuality. More illusion than reality, their skin color hybrid figures who are bearers of cultural patterns, instruments of deception, objects of desire, and who reflect historical experiences and power relations. More recently, a keen interest in cartography and globes has been evident in Shonibare's work. In his reconfigurations of classical sculptures, again featuring the typical Dutch wax batik design, the heads have been replaced with hand-colored globes. Through this critical gesture in the beautiful guise of classical aesthetics, Shonibare calls for historical multi-perspectivity and a rethinking of space, mobility, and cultural identity. Commissioned to produce a work for Hereford Cathedral in West England, Yinka Shonibare engaged in study of medieval world map located there. The largest and most important surviving universal map of the Middle Ages, it was created at the cathedral around 1300. Not a travel map. The Hereford map is to be understood as a universal imago mundi, an image of the then known world. The dwellers at the Earth's edge shown in the Hereford map refer to numerous fantastic mythical creatures which already preoccupied ancient authors. Shonibare's approach to the hybrid creatures and projections of the Hereford Mapamundi is one of playful parody. In the catalogue of origin myths, they represent the radical and uncanny other and thus reflect the prevailing Occidental ethnocentrism. Shonibare, however, converts this exclusion into elegant exclusivity. By celebrating the peculiarity and eccentricity of those finements of the imagination and turning them into aliens descending from the sky, who equipped with parachutes float in the air or have already landed. You can see them there on that wall. Other worldly creatures, they are oddballs in decorative surroundings who are appreciated and respected in their peculiarity. The brightly colorful textile works represent a cheerful deconstruction and reversal of dark, very dark stereotypes. Yinka Shonibare is a cheerful enlightener who always manages to tell stories other than the familiar ones. There's always a very serious concern underlying the cheerful and ironic presentation. This is how great art is created. I would like to extend my warmest thanks to Yinka Shonibare for his trust and the highly stimulating and enjoyable cooperation. I'm particularly grateful to Alba Kleini and to Ruth Hogan of Shonibare Studio and to Karen Hepburn of Stephen Friedman Gallery in London for their wonderful support, without which the exhibition would not have been possible. Many thanks to David Kushwain and Mimi Kerpel. I would like to thank also the team of the Museum der Moderne Salzburg for their dedicated and professional work. And I'm particularly grateful to Mariana Schneider, who curated the exhibition together with me and did an absolutely great job. Special thanks for her careful exhibition management and supervision of the publication. I would like to thank Antoine Sargent and Mariana Schneider for their knowledgeable texts and Paul Gilroy for agreeing to the publication of his interview with Yinka Shonibare. Many thanks also are due to Victor Balko for the masterful design of the catalogue, to Hilmer Publishers for the pleasant collaboration, and to the many lenders for their generous support of the exhibition project. Finally, I would like to thank Martin Gilbert, Director of the British Council in Austria, Switzerland, and the Nordic countries for supporting the exhibition. We will now see a video message by the British Ambassador in Austria, His Excellency Lai Turner, who has recorded it because he couldn't be here this evening. So welcome to the Ambassador. So we will see it now.
Hello. Hello, my name's Lee Turner, British Ambassador in Vienna. Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to speak to you today at the opening of End of Empire at Museum der Moderne in Salzburg. It's a pity we can't all meet in person to celebrate the opening, but it's great to see that cultural events are happening again, and particularly great to be here to celebrate the work of the extraordinary and visionary artist Yinka Shonibare. Cultural exchange is one of the main pillars of the bilateral relationship between the UK and Austria. Both countries see culture as key to identity and quality of life, and I'm particularly grateful for the work of the British Council on this, and I'd like to thank British Council Austria Director Martin Gilbert for his support. The main element of this cultural exchange is not just to celebrate our two countries' rich cultural history, it's to raise questions, to open new perspectives, and to challenge the status quo. And Yinka Shonibare does exactly that. He's an artist known for exploring how Britain's colonialist past contributes to present-day issues such as racism, xenophobia, and the construction of our collective cultural identity. At a time when globalization leads us to try and understand why the world looks like it does today, Yinka Shonibare's art is an important contribution to public debate that needs to continue, both in the UK and around the world. I'd like to thank the Museum der Moderne for hosting this exhibition, and I look forward to visiting it when I can. And welcome also to Yinka Shonibare. Thank you.
Shonibare is not here this evening, but he is virtually present at the opening. So we had a talk this afternoon, and we have recorded some elements from this talk, and we want to present it here. So welcome to Yinka Shonibare. So it's a great honor and pleasure to meet him here. Can you tell us a little bit more about the context of the fabrics in your work?
I must say thank you very much for inviting me to do this exhibition. I'm sorry I can't be there today, but I hope to come sometime in July. And okay, so about the use of fabrics in my art. In the 80s and the 90s, in the context of the international art scene, well, many artists were kind of, starting to look at the idea of identity and identity issues in their work. And before that period, I was at the university, and I was trying to make work about what was happening in Russia at that time. I was making work about perestroika when Russia was changing. And one of my tutors said, well, why are you making work about Russia? You are African, aren't you? Why don't you make authentic African art? And so as an African who's lived in Nigeria and lived in Lagos, and I've also lived in London, I wanted to know how to be authentic in the contemporary world. What does this actually mean? So on the question of authenticity, I started to think about what people think of when they think about Africa and African identity. So I thought about the fabrics, and initially I thought the fabrics were originally made in Africa. And then I went to a shop in Brixton Market, and I started talking to them, and they said, well, actually the fabrics are Indonesian-inspired fabrics, then produced by the Dutch, and then sold to the West African market. But I thought that's, the connection between Asia, Holland, and Africa, I thought that was a kind of a metaphor for being contemporary. I thought that this was a very interesting connection. And also, it touches on the history of the colonial relationships between all those places as well. Holland, Indonesia, then Holland, Africa. And then, of course, the fabrics were also manufactured in Manchester, the United Kingdom. So, and I am a product of empire, if you like, of the residue of empire, what's left after that. And so these fabrics then became an important starting point for me to start to explore a number of issues of around imperialism, identity formation, and all of those issues.
Behind me, we can see one part of the end of empire installation. So that is the commissioned work that you realized in 2016, and we can see there two figures dressed in elegant Victorian suites, opposite on each other from each other on a seesaw. And can you explain us a little bit more about the background of and the context of this wonderful installation?
Yes. So this installation was made at the 100th anniversary of the First World War. And so I was commissioned to make this work. And then I was really thinking about, first of all, that war, the First World War, wasn't only fought in Europe, it was a global war. And there were many people from the former colonies who fought in that war. And then I was also thinking about, war, what does it actually mean? It's about two sides in opposition to each other. But actually, it's not necessarily inevitable. War is not inevitable. It's up to people and how they negotiate. And so I decided to create this seesaw where you have two opposing sides of the argument, and they get to balance at one point, and then they also unbalance again. But this is kind of the perpetual story of conflict, and historically as well. So that's what I'm trying to explore in this piece.
Now we reused the title "End of Empire" also for the show. So are there different layers of End of Empire that you will address in the show?
Well, I mean, I think that first of all, the First World War was very significant in this notion of end of empire, because many people from the former colonies, they fought alongside their former masters, and they realized that they were not invincible, and the global movement for independence started because a lot of this weakness was exposed. So I would actually put the First World War as the real turning point for challenging imperial power, because it led to global activism after that, which then slowly ended up in many of those former colonies becoming independent, including Nigeria in 1960. And I think a lot of the, certainly, I mean, most of my works in this exhibition challenge the notion of power. They deconstruct the Western canon. That could be in literature, that could be in art, it's a relooking or reconsideration of the Western canon, which you can find throughout most of my works.
When we go to the next gallery, we see here your iconic photographic series, Diary of a Victorian Dandy. And there you slip into the role of the Victorian dandy yourself. We see you surrounded by refined luxury and the British aristocracy. Could you tell us more about your ambivalent relationship with the Victorian era and the aspect of role play in your work?
Yes, well, if you live in the UK, you are actually surrounded by the legacy of the Victorian period. And we all know that actually, this was the height of the great British Empire, Great Britain, the Victorian period. Mm-hmm. And as, as a citizen of the former British colony, I have two choices. Whether I should be afraid of this or I should actually play with this. So I took the other choice, not to be afraid of this, to occupy this space and to make it my stage. So to create a kind of theatrical relationship with this history. And
Yeah.
so, and Diary of a Victorian Dandy, the series, is actually based on Hogarth's painting, The Rake's Progress. And so I go through the journey of being the dandy. Now, when you look at historical paintings generally, whenever there was a Black person in the painting, they are not in a powerful position. They are either serving or, be a valet or somebody. But I decided then to change that, to put myself in this, to make myself the center of focus in a kind of frivolous way. But also, this was my first public artwork. So this series were actually on the London Underground as big posters in London in the 90s. And the work was very shocking to a lot of people at the time, because not many, they didn't put artwork on the London Underground at that time. Now they do. And also, the fiction I created also made people wonder if this person actually really existed or not. And so that was a very kind of interesting device. But I've always liked to use a theatrical device to express, fantasy. And we know that in the Caribbean, they created Carnival. And it was a day when you could go out and maybe you could be a former slave, but today you can be the master and you can dress up and you can turn yourself into anything. So this is why I like the kind of theatricality and masquerade, if you like, as a space to explore my fantasies.
Mm. The installation at Trafalgar Square was also a starting point for the wind sculptures that you developed then from, I think, 2013 on. Over the last year, of course, we saw that thousands of protesters assembled in the public space in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. And controversial monuments honoring mostly white male profiteers of colonialism throughout the world, they have been removed or damaged. And I would like to ask you if you would share your position on that, how we could deal or how we should deal with monuments in the future.
Well, I mean, I think that, this is a debate that the community will need to have. I mean, on the one hand, I don't believe actually that you can erase history, because history is there and you can't really erase it. But if you have a very offensive sculpture in any community, then the community have to discuss about this, what they want to do. But I think eventually, maybe if they are so disgusting, they should be taken away and they should put them into museums, and then people can create context for them so they can write about them and you can see what really happened. But I'm not a supporter of complete destruction and to erase history, because if you do this, you're going to repeat the same mistake. So, so in my opinion, I think that, yes, where the community wants something taken away, then it should be taken away. But I think each community should be consulted. So I don't want to have one general rule for every community, because every community is different.
And we are very pleased that we have the African Library here. And it is kind of a growing catalog of narratives. And yeah, it would be lovely if you could tell us more about the concept behind the African Library.
Yes, so the African Library, well, first of all, in this work, I wanted to celebrate the Africans who fought against imperialism, and the Africans who tried to develop the nation of Africa, the freedom fighters, and also people in different areas of African culture who are building the nation and in different areas. So you have people like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Nelson Mandela, Patrice Lumumba, and many, many more Africans who are kind of also contributing to global culture. And it's important to celebrate these people because, in relation to global culture, many of them are not acknowledged. And I think that, so this is a kind of acknowledgement and celebration, this piece.
Now I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Brigitte Pallauf, the President of the Parliament of Salzburg. She will speak to you and she will open the exhibition. Welcome.
Excellency, dear ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and pleasure for me to welcome you all here at the museum and also all friends and guests who are attending the opening via streaming. My very warm welcome also on behalf of our Governor Wilfried Haslauer goes first and foremost to Yinka Shonibare. He can't be here personally, but he's with us this evening in a very special way, and we are looking forward to welcome him in summer here in Salzburg. And I'm sure you all share my elation at the fact that this is the first exhibition we have had the privilege of opening in presence for a very, very long time. Actually, it was already on the program last summer, but you know the reason for the delay, and there is one name, and it's Corona. Dear guests and friends, Salzburg is a place of international encounter, regionally rooted, open to new things, to exchange and reflection. Salzburg is a land of culture. All this not only in summer within the framework of the well-known and international well-known Salzburg Festival, but always all year round. Salzburg and its museums are places of the search for meaning, of orientation, of reflection, and places of knowledge. And, not to forget, also places of joy. End of Empire, the last phase in the decline of an imperial power, is the title of this exhibition. Headless figures, often in 18th and 19th century costumes, confront us here in tragicomic staging in tableaux vivants. And this in a city that is itself a staging like hardly any other. Staging of the Baroque worldview of vanitas and carpe diem, architectural staging of the absolute power of prince archbishops in the 18th century, whose power came to an end at the beginning of the 19th century. The city had to and must live with this. Mozart, the Salzburg genius Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, offered the city the possibility of countering the Baroque gravitational stiltedness with a new cheerfulness. He offered himself as a guiding figure to stand up for a new time against the heaviness of the earth, as Anton Dusswaldner wrote in an essay. And Salzburg has accepted this offer as a challenge for a conversation between the past and the present. On behalf of the 100th anniversary of the Salzburg Festival, the festival laid down in a 10-point memorandum for the 21st century, among other things, following points. The Salzburg Festival does not always have to be reinvented, but it must always be led into a new present. And tomorrow, even more than today, festivals will have to function as mediators of knowledge and world memory, as archives of our knowledge of the world. The same is true for this museum. It can also be said for our museums. How wonderfully the work of an artist fits in here, which from the interaction of history, politics, tradition, philosophy and art has such a great share in this knowledge of the world. With this exhibition, the Museum of Modern Art offers us the opportunity to question our positions, to compare them with other perspectives, and to critically evaluate history. That all sounds very reasonable, but reason alone cannot be relied upon. It even has to take a back seat sometimes, so that we can experience ourselves as sensual beings who are allowed to feel pleasure and joy, to be touched and to be affected. And both, it seems to me, we find in the work of Yinka Shonibare, which enables seriousness and explosiveness, critical, insightful reflection, first and foremost about ourselves, as well as joy in the exuberant splendor of color and the absurd sides of our humanity resulting from the historical distance. It was also in the 18th century that a natural disaster was to overthrow a worldview and seemingly unshakable certainty. The Lisbon earthquake, 1755. The philosopher Voltaire watched it with amusement in his satirical novel Candide. The current pandemic should perhaps have a similar function, namely to subject entrenched thought patterns to critical scrutiny. This is exactly what the Museum of Modern Art's guiding theme for 2021 is all about, focusing more on critically reflecting on patterns of thought and perception. Since today, also with this beautiful exhibition. Dear ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, words of thanks are spoken. Thank you all, dear Director Sadowski, and you, co-curator Marianne Schneider, and the entire team of our museum. You did a great job. Thank you very much, and that's your applause. I wish for this exhibition an extraordinarily large number of visitors. I look forward to the hospitality that we may show them, and hereby I declare the exhibition open. Thank you very much.